Section 14 of the Mabinogion, Volume 1, translated by Lady Charlotte Guest. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Section 14. After this they saw a troop coming towards the ford. "Iddawc," enquired Rhonabwy, "to whom does yonder troop belong?" "They are the fellows of Rhuvawn Pebyr, the son of Prince Deorthach, and these men are honourably served with mead and bragget, and are freely beloved by the daughters of the kings of the island of Britain. And this they merit, for they were ever in the front and the rear in every peril." And he saw but one hue upon the men and the horses of this troop, for they were all as red as blood. And when one of the knights rode forth from the troop, he looked like a pillar of fire, glancing athwart the sky. And this troop encamped above the ford. Then they beheld another troop coming towards the ford. And these, from their horses' chests upwards, were whiter than the lily, and below blacker than jet. And they saw one of these knights go before the rest, and spur his horse into the ford in such a manner, that the water dashed over Arthur and the bishop, and those holding counsel with them, so that they were as wet as if they had been drenched in the river. And as he turned the head of his horse, the youth who stood before Arthur struck the horse over the nostrils with his sheathed sword, so that had it been with the bare blade, it would have been a marvel if the bone had not been wounded as well as the flesh. And the knight drew his sword half out of the scabbard, and asked of him, "Wherefore didst thou strike my horse? Whether it was in insult or in counsel unto me? Thou dost indeed lack counsel. What madness caused thee to ride so furiously as to dash the water of the ford over Arthur, and the consecrated bishop, and their counsellors, so that they were as wet as if they had been dragged out of the river? As counsel then will I take it." So he turned his horse's head round towards his army. "Iddawc," said Rhonabwy, "who was yonder knight?" "The most eloquent and the wisest youth that is in this island, Adaon, the son of Taliesin." "Who was the man that struck his horse?" "A youth of froward nature, Elphin, the son of Gwyddno." Then spake a tall and stately man, of noble and flowing speech, saying that it was a marvel that so vast a host should be assembled in so narrow a space, and that it was a still greater marvel that those should be there at that time who had promised to be by midday in the battle of Badon, fighting with Osla Gyllellvawr. "Whether thou mayest choose to proceed or not, I will proceed." "Thou sayest well," said Arthur, "and we will all go together." "Iddawc," said Rhonabwy, "who was the man who spoke so marvellously unto Arthur erewhile?" "A man who may speak as boldly as he listeth, Caradawc Vrech the son of Llyr Marini, his chief counsellor and his cousin." Then Iddawc took Rhonabwy behind him on his horse, and that mighty host moved forward, each troop in its order, towards Cefndigoll. And when they came to the middle of the ford of the Severn, Iddawc turned his horse's head, and Rhonabwy looked along the valley of the Severn. And he beheld two fair troops coming towards the ford. One troop there came of brilliant white, whereof every one of the men had a scarf of white satin, with jet black borders. And the knees and the tops of the shoulders of their horses were jet black, though they were of a pure white in every other part. And their banners were pure white, with black points to them all. Iddawc, said Rhonabwy, who are yonder pure white troop? They are the men of Norway, and March the son of Mabinogion is their prince, and he is cousin unto Arthur. And further on he saw a troop, whereof each man wore garments of jet black, with borders of pure white to every scarf. And the tops of the shoulders and the knees of their horses were pure white, and their banners were jet black, with pure white at the points of each. Iddawc, said Rhonabwy, who are the jet black troop yonder? They are the men of Denmark, and Edirn the son of Nudd is their prince. And when they had overtaken the host, Arthur and his army of mighty ones dismounted below Caerbadon, and he perceived that he and Iddawc journeyed the same road as Arthur. And after they had dismounted, he heard a great tumult and confusion among the host. And such as were then at the flanks turned to the centre, and such as had been in the centre moved to the flanks. And then, behold, he saw a knight coming, clad, both he and his horse, in mail, of which the rings were whiter than the whitest lily, and the rivets redder than the ruddiest blood. And he rode among the host. Iddawc, said Rhonabwy, will yonder host flee? King Arthur never fled, and if this discourse of thine were heard, thou wert a lost man. But as to the knight whom thou seest yonder, it is Kai. The fairest horseman is Kai in all Arthur's court, and the men who are at the front of the army hasten to the rear to see Kai ride, and the men who are in the centre flee to the side from the shock of his horse. And this is the cause of the confusion of the host. Thereupon they heard a call made for Kadwr, Earl of Cornwall. And behold, he arose with the sword of Arthur in his hand, and the similitude of two serpents was upon the sword, in gold. And when the sword was drawn from its scabbard, it seemed as if two flames of fire burst forth from the jaws of the serpents. And then so wonderful was the sword, that it was hard for any one to look upon it. And the host became still, and the tumult ceased, and the Earl returned to the tent. Iddawc, said Rhonabwy, who is the man who bore the sword of Arthur? Kadwr, the Earl of Cornwall, whose duty is to arm the king on the days of battle and warfare. And they heard a call made for Eirynwych Amheibyn, Arthur's servant, a red, rough, ill-favoured man, having red whiskers, with bristly hairs. And behold, he came upon a tall red horse, with the mane parted on each side, and he brought with him a large and beautiful sumpter pack. And the huge red youth dismounted before Arthur, and he drew a golden chair out of the pack, and a carpet of diapered satin. And he spread the carpet before Arthur, and there was an apple of ruddy gold at each corner thereof, and he placed the chair upon the carpet. And so large was the chair, that 3 armed warriors might have sat therein. Gwen was the name of the carpet, and it was one of its properties, that whoever was upon it No one could see him.